Good evening.
Good evening.
Can you hear me? Our families can be such joy in our lives. They can be such sources of pleasure. The experiences we go through our families, the bonding we have with our families. And then again, sometimes our families really drive us completely crazy. Sometimes we ask ourselves, who in the world are these people within our families? Perhaps they are really aliens from outer space after all. But regardless of the kind of family we have, our families are the vehicle through which we begin to learn all kinds of lessons. For instance, quick disclaimer, I did all sorts of animation effects, and there seems to be a bit of a compatibility issue. I think it's because when you subscribe to a certain level of Microsoft software, and then you move it to another program, it does funny things. So if you see that, that's why. Anyway, there's a lot of things we learn through our families. Love is certainly essential that we learn through our families. We learn mentoring, we learn patience, all kinds of lessons like that. What about setting priorities? Absolutely. Many times our family is our priority, our number one priority. What about setting boundaries? Well, if we don't learn how to set boundaries within our families, we can wind up having a lot of problems. What about tragedy and loss? Unfortunately, that often happens in our families. It's almost inevitable. What about commitment, of course? What about inspiration? Our families can inspire us in all kinds of positive ways. What about bonding? If children don't bond with their parents at an early age, it can make all the difference in the world as to what kind of life they lead afterwards. So bonding between parents and children is crucial. What about handling risk? Sure, in a way we learn to handle risk and take all kinds of risks or avoid certain risks with our family members, and our family provides a structure to learn such lessons like that. What about communication? Well, hopefully our families are an environment where we can communicate with family members. What about betrayal? Unfortunately, sometimes we experience betrayal from family members. That doesn't happen too often, but it can. On and on and on it goes. A big one would be responsibility. Through our families, with our families, responsibility is major. But regardless of what we experience through our families, all of these are examples of trials, missions that we experience, and our families are a vehicle through which these trials and missions frequently occur. In fact, the experience of going through trial and missions are signs of reincarnation, and it is reincarnation that will often turn the home into a school for souls. But what exactly is the big deal about reincarnation? Well, I'm going to spend a few minutes doing a little bit of Spiritism 101 to kind of put this in context. Spiritually speaking, our families are the primary vehicle through which reincarnation gets played out. And reincarnation matters so much in a number of ways, but in question 167 and 171 from the Spirit's book, in talking about the basis of reincarnation, question 171 says that the purpose of reincarnation is atonement and the progressive betterment of humankind. That without going through reincarnation, there really wouldn't be any justice. That reincarnation is part of God's justice. Question 171 in the Spirit's book says that the reason reincarnation is based on God's justice is because it describes God as being like a benevolent father, that God will, or benevolent parent, let's say. No matter how many times we make mistakes and cause problems and so forth, God's capacity for forgiveness is infinite. So we're given another chance to try to get things right, to try to learn, to try to grow. And it wouldn't be fair if things were otherwise. Also, reincarnation emphasizes simply that all spirits strive for perfection. It's part of our nature. We want to do a little bit better than we did before. Yes, we can be stubborn. Yes, we can stay in the same place for a long time. But nevertheless, spirits do strive for perfection. And going through a corporeal life and the trials that come with that corporeal life are what allow us to then begin to progress bit by bit. Question 203 points out that the soul is indivisible. And the reason this matters is because reincarnation points out the difference between spiritual ties versus biological ties. A lot of times when we think about biological ties, we probably think that's more important in many ways. Who our lineage is, who members of our families in the past were, and so forth. But Spiritism points out that the reason the soul's indivisible because parents in giving birth to their children are only providing biological life. They're not transferring part of their soul onto their children. Yes, they can inspire their children, but that's not the same thing. And therefore, this implies that spiritual ties are more important than blood ties. But also, question 206 in the Spirit's book, in talking about, for instance, so we might want to celebrate our ancestors via biological ties. I can brag and say, well, I'm related to Abraham Lincoln or somebody famous, something like that. Well, that may sound impressive, but it's irrelevant for a number of reasons. But one of them is that the Spirit's book emphasizes that if we really want to celebrate our family members, the way to do that, family members from the past, is to emulate their qualities. That we want to try and do what we can to learn the positive things from our family members, but you can also reverse that. We also want to be able to avoid any negative behavior. Let's say most families have certain trends and patterns of dysfunctional behavior. And if we see that, then maybe as we go from one generation to the next, we can do our part to try to keep that from just being transferred down. Because sometimes dysfunctional behavior gets transferred from one generation to the next when people don't make an effort to pay attention to that dysfunctional behavior and then try to see what they can do to either stop it or change it. In the Gospel, according to Spiritism, it emphasizes that there really is an inseparable link between reincarnation and family ties. For instance, reincarnation strengthens family ties because a lot of times spirits that come into the same family will do so through feeling, because there's previous feelings of affection, previous feelings of empathy, there could be similar interests in love, and this is one of the reasons why sometimes spirits will follow each other from one incarnation into the next. That's why you've got members of your family who you really connect with. There may be a past history to that. Or maybe certain people you meet, friends you meet, and you really bond with certain people. I'm sure you've all noticed how sometimes when you meet somebody for the first time, you just connect with that person and you feel close to them. Other people, there's kind of a repulsion going on, or even just a lack of affinity. It's not even a dislike, it's more indifference. But that can all, whatever's going on there can be a sign of the kind of relationship we might have had with a particular individual in a prior incarnation. But the nature of these relationships can also, as question 204 points out, sometimes the kind of relationships we have not only point out the type of empathy or aversion that we have, but it can illustrate how people we seem to have met for the first time may actually be people we really connect with. I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about a specific example of how the family, in a way, is like a stage. The family is like a stage that creates the journey through which the individuals within that family are going to play out whatever missions they may have with each other, whatever trials they need to go through, and so forth. And I'm going to do this by talking about a moment from a specific book. I'm going to guess that you're familiar with this book. This is the third book in the Andre Louis series, and it's called Missionaries of the Light. In Missionaries of the Light, Andre Louis is experiencing and witnessing the process of reincarnation in more detail. He's actually seeing some of the decisions that go into how a spirit will incarnate and why a spirit will incarnate into a particular family. And here's an example from this book. There are three individuals in the Missionaries of the Light called Segismundo, Adelino, and Raquel. Adelino and Raquel are husband and wife living in the incarnate world, and Segismundo is a spirit. Adelino and Raquel have one child, a nice child named Joel, about 5 years old. And Segismundo not only wants to reincarnate into the family of Adelino and Raquel, but he needs to. Really needs to. But there's a problem. When Adelino, the husband, goes to sleep, he goes out of his body, and he encounters a presence in the spirit world, and it disturbs him a great deal. And Segismundo senses that Adelino has a problem with him. And so Adelino is getting really upset about this. We're learning all this through a high-level spirit named Alexander. Alexander is kind of like a spirit teacher for Andre Louis in this book. Alexander is the source, frequently the source of wisdom in this particular book. And what Alexander does is that he starts to explain the story of Segismundo, Adelino, and Raquel. He's been asked to help. He's been asked to help with this difficult process of reincarnation. And Alexander is the right person for this, not only because he's a high-level spirit, but he also knows Segismundo, Adelino, and Raquel, because Alexander explains to us that the four of them were friends in their prior incarnation on Earth. We don't know everything that happened, but this is probably what happened, based upon what Alexander tells us. In a prior incarnation, probably the 19th century, Adelino and Raquel were also husband and wife. And Segismundo was a friend, and so was Alexander. Segismundo and Raquel had an affair. It was strongly hinted.
Segismundo was what?
Segismundo and Raquel had an affair in their prior incarnation. Mm-hmm. Adelino found out, probably, because what we do know, what Alexander tells us, is that Adelino challenges Segismundo to a duel. It's probably Adelino. And we know for sure that Adelino was killed by Segismundo in that duel. And Segismundo made some promises to Raquel, and he did not keep them. Probably promised to be with her, but there were some problems. For one thing, since he killed Adelino in the duel, he was now in trouble with the law. And second, he probably made promises to her like he would be with her afterwards. Maybe he wasn't as interested in a commitment to her as she thought. Whatever happened, Adelino didn't fulfill his promises to Raquel that he made her think he would. Raquel, we're told, probably wound up disgraced, but she winds up in a life of prostitution. And Alexander tells us that when Raquel finally disincarnates and when Segismundo finally disincarnates, the two of them and Adelino are all in the lower zones, angry, full of bitterness, and so forth. Well, eventually they get out of there. And Adelino and Raquel made some promises before they came into the spirit world. One of which would be that they would probably be a parent to Segismundo. This is implied. What happens, though, is that when Adelino and Raquel do incarnate, they meet, they form a relationship, they become husband and wife again, and they get kind of comfortable with the life that they have. They have a nice child named Joel. And as I mentioned before, when Adelino has a dream and goes out of his body, he encounters the presence of Segismundo without knowing who Segismundo is, and he keeps repelling Segismundo. And this troubles Segismundo a lot, and he's beginning to lose hope. So Alexander is going to step in and try to help. And Andre Luis gets to observe this. So what happens is that Alexander, Andre Luis, and others go and visit the family of Adelino and Raquel. And Segismundo was there. One day, as Alexander and Andre Luis are visiting, Adelino comes home, and he's really not in a particularly good mood. Adelino is troubled by something. Raquel senses this. So Alexander decides to help. Through magnetism, Alexander persuades their young child, Joel. Joel is a very angelic and sweet child. He prays with his mother. He likes to pray. And Joel senses that Daddy is upset or Daddy's grumpy about something. So Joel asks his father what's going on. And Joel begins to realize, Adelino begins to realize how he's coming across. And so Adelino begins to think maybe he should pay more attention to his own behavior. But also Joel gets his father to promise that the next day when he comes home from work, he will pray with him and his mother. Joel keeps his promise. Adelino keeps his promise. He comes back home the next day, and Adelino prays with his son Joel and his wife Raquel. And then, that night, things start to change a little bit. Raquel and Adelino go to sleep, and they go out of your bodies. I'm going to guess you all know that when you see images of a spirit with a cord attached to it, those are incarnate spirits having an out-of-body experience, and the spirits in this picture who do not have a cord are in the spirit world. So Alexander and Andre Luis are there as Raquel and Adelino go out of their body. Raquel meets her mother, and the two of them pray, and they're content with that. Raquel is a little more advanced spiritually than her husband Adelino. It's often common in relationships that one member of a relationship is a little more advanced spiritually speaking than the other, and that the one who is more advanced spiritually also has a little more responsibility for the relationship. So Raquel is helping indirectly by praying for, just praying, probably praying for Adelino perhaps, but she's praying, and this helps with the environment. When Adelino goes out of his body, his vibrational level is a little different. He's a little shaky in the spirit world. He's not so comfortable. He's a little afraid. And very quickly, he starts to encounter the presence of Segismundo. Now, Adelino, as I mentioned before, was killed in a duel by Segismundo, and Segismundo betrayed him by having an affair with his wife. But Adelino doesn't remember this. He doesn't know who Segismundo is. He just senses a troubling presence when Segismundo is around. So Alexander, the high-level spirit, steps in. He tries to plead with Segismundo. Actually, Segismundo himself pleads to Adelino when they finally confront each other. He asks Adelino to forgive him. And then Alexander talks to Adelino and tries to convince Adelino that we serve God when we finally let go of anger, hatred, animosities, and things like that. When we decide to serve God, that stuff will begin to fall away. And we actually see this occur because what happens is that Alexander finally persuades Adelino to accept this person, Segismundo, as his brother. Again, not very aware of the history between them. He just agrees to accept this person as his brother, spiritually speaking. And then Andre Luis, who's witnessing this exchange, notices something amazing. Andre Luis looks at Adelino and sees a kind of cloud release from Adelino's spirit. In other words, whatever anger, rage, hatred, and so forth that's welled up within inside Adelino's paraspirit, some of that begins to release. And this helps. It begins to change the environment. And what we're then told is that Adelino and Raquel wake up. They remember a little bit of what happened, but not too much. But more importantly, the environment within their family of Adelino, Raquel, and Joao, begins to feel a little more positive because Adelino's energy is starting to change. And this allows for what happens next. Conception. There's a lot of detail in Missionaries of the Light that explain how Alexander and other high-level spirits make sure that the right sperm from Adelino makes its way and fertilizes Raquel's egg. And the implications of this are very interesting because Alexander says Adelino could not conceive because he was so full of hatred and anger and rage. Now, this implies a few things. You can't create life out of hate. That's one of the things. Does that mean that all parents who maybe have anger cannot conceive? No, that's not likely. But in this particular case, one of the things I've heard over and over again in Spiritism is every case is a case, meaning every situation is a little different, so it's not a one-size-fits-all. But in this particular case, Adelino's ability to conceive was being hampered, disrupted, prevented almost by his anger and rage and so forth. And so Alexander and the other high-level spirits are doing a fair amount of work behind the scenes to kind of make sure that this happens. And then Andre Luis goes back a little while later to visit this family, and Segismundo is born as the second child of Raquel and Adelino. Again, none of them know the prior history, and they don't need to. So this is a new opportunity, because for the last time these three spirits were in the spirit world, they were leading a very turbulent existence in the lower zones. They finally got out of there. And as I mentioned before, God is like a benevolent father. They got another chance to kind of work things out between them. And so the decision was made in this particular case to have these three incarnate in this way. Are they all going to get along? Well, they're going to have their work cut out for them. One of the major themes, one that I mentioned before, I believe, in families, is forgiveness. And Adelino has to be able to forgive. He may have some trouble with this son of his. We don't know what kind of relationship this father and son are really going to have. There may be some animosities there that the two of them aren't always aware of why it's even there, but it may be there. And so Adelino has to, and Raquel, both have to make sure that as the parents, they treat Segismundo lovingly, that they are kind to him as good parents, obviously, should be. Suppose the roles were reversed. Suppose for a moment that Segismundo came back as the father of Adelino, and Segismundo and Raquel were husband and wife. Would that work so well? Maybe, but probably not if one of the major trials is forgiveness. So the fact that this configuration of this particular family occurred the way that it did allows for a particular trial to be, it makes it possible that the trial will be more successful. In this case, the trial of forgiveness. That Adelino and Raquel, as good parents, will learn to love this child, Segismundo, unconditionally. And this idea is picked up in the Gospel, chapter 14, number 8, which is a passage from St. Augustine. And St. Augustine, in talking to parents, points out that the path to God requires only one password, and that's love. And that spirits learn that love, in order to love, we have to be able to forgive. When we are truly able to forgive, then love is possible. And love doesn't flourish where there's hatred, pure and simple. It's very difficult. So Adelino and Raquel and Segismundo will have a lot to go through. We don't know what really happens to them. But you can see in this example how the choices in reincarnation make a difference. The type of reincarnation inform us as to the type of trial, should I say the trial that's more important, that's likely to occur. So start to wrap up. Again, going back to St. Augustine. St. Augustine emphasizes that the soul incarnates for one purpose only, and that's spiritual advancement. And in talking to parents, St. Augustine is saying that parents need to make this clear to themselves, that they need to accept this responsibility of being able to love their children unconditionally. It's like, I would say, the most important thing parents do. Yes, parents set boundaries with their children. Yes, parents can get irritated with their children and there can be struggles. But even when our children misbehave, do things that get on our nerves, that's familiar, right? Good parents still are able to love their children unconditionally. The way God loves all of us, all of his children unconditionally, no matter what we do. And even when we behave badly, of course, we're going to be held accountable. but we are going to be given another chance at some point. If we didn't, then life would be rather unfair, because why would people bother to try to do better at all if we all think we've got one shot, that's it, and if we don't succeed, well, too bad. That pretty much means everybody's going to fail, because we're all imperfect. And when I say that parents should love their children unconditionally, this doesn't mean, of course, that parents are going to be perfect either, because parents inevitably make mistakes. There's no such thing as a perfect parent, and that's okay. It's expected. Hopefully, whatever mistakes parents make, they can somehow find a way to make it work in spite of the mistakes. But a perfect parent, that's very unlikely. I'm going to wrap up by making this recommendation. This is I don't have copies of this book, but it's a book called The Parent's Handbook. My wife and I found this very helpful. There are lots of books, I'm sure, but this one I know and I like. It makes suggestions to parents who those who are either thinking of becoming parents, or maybe those who have a small child, or even a child who's a few years old. But it offers all kinds of information on constructive ways to communicate with children, how to set boundaries in a loving way, and so forth. It has a lot of good practical advice. So if any of you either are thinking of becoming parents, or you know somebody who may become a parent in the future, I would recommend checking this out. At the end of the day, the goal with our families, which St. Augustine emphasizes, is through our families, we can try to bring one another closer to God. Again, we don't have to be perfect, but the more we can do our part within our families, the more we can take responsibility within our families to help one another when we can, and help and try to help one another bring one another closer to God by emphasizing compassion, love, forgiveness, tolerance, knowing how to set boundaries in a way that's healthy, that kind of thing. Then when we can do that, then all of us have that opportunity to begin to release some of that stuff within our paraspirit that we all need to release. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Perfect. I love the stories. They're just actually Missionaries of Light is an amazing book. I think we have. I'm not sure if we have that one. Thank you, Peter, again, and of course we have to bring him back in a few months. He was just today at the New York, right?
Yeah, in Brooklyn, the Tri-State Spiritual Federation.
Yeah, they had an activity all day, different lectures, I think.
Mindfulness for better living.
Very good, very good. So he came from Brooklyn straight here. So we're very happy for that. And I'll be doing the translations, just a few of the things that are coming up. And I think it's important because people have been asking. We have, how do you get out of here? Okay. A gente tem, pessoal, vou fazer as duas línguas agora. A gente tem várias atividades no final desse mês e em novembro. Curso de passes. We're going to have the course for the passes. Anybody who wants to